My name is Helen Anderson, and I grew up in what I thought was the ideal American family. We weren't rich at first, but we were happy, just me, Mom, and Dad living in our modest starter home. My father, James Anderson, was the hardest working man I've ever known. He built his transportation company from the ground up, starting with just 2 trucks and gradually expanding into a successful business. I remember how he'd sometimes come home covered in grease because he insisted on maintaining the trucks himself in the early days. Mom, Sarah is her name, though I can barely bring myself to call her that anymore, worked as a restaurant manager back then. She was actually good at her job, though she'd constantly complain about it. One day, James, she'd say during dinner, pushing food around her plate, "I want to be a proper housewife. All these late nights are killing me." Dad would just smile and pat her hand, promising her that soon she'd be able to quit. And he kept that promise. When I was 9, Dad's business really took off. He landed several major contracts, and suddenly we were moving into this beautiful 2-story house in one of the nicest neighborhoods in town. I got my own room, huge and bright, with windows looking out over our backyard. I went wild with the decoration. Pale purple walls, fairy lights everywhere, and this massive bookshelf Dad built himself. He spent an entire weekend on it, cursing under his breath when he thought I couldn't hear him, but beaming with pride when it was finally finished. Mom quit her job shortly after we moved, just like she'd always wanted. Instead of taking care of the house like she'd claimed she wanted to, she was barely ever home. It was always lunch with the girls or just a quick shopping trip or my salon appointment ran late. Dad didn't seem to mind. He was too busy with his company, though he always made time for me. Every Sunday was our day, we'd go for ice cream, and he'd listen to all my stories about school and friends as if they were the most important things in the world. The last time we had ice cream together was just before I turned 11. It was a bright spring day, and Dad was telling me about one of his drivers calling in sick. "Guess I'll have to do the run myself tomorrow," he said, finishing his cone. "Just like the old days." "Can I come with you?" I asked, excited at the prospect of a road trip with Dad. He chuckled and ruffled my hair. "Not this time, princess. It's just a quick overnight trip. I'll be back before you know it." I remember hugging him extra tight that evening before bed. "Love you, Dad," I said, not knowing it would be the last time I'd ever say those words to him. The next morning, he left before dawn. Mom was still asleep, so Maria, our nanny, made his coffee and packed him a lunch. I heard him start his truck and pull out of the driveway. That was the last time I ever saw my father alive. The phone call came at 3:47 a.m. I know because I was awake, unable to sleep due to that strange feeling in my stomach. I heard Mom scream from her bedroom, followed by the sound of something breaking, probably her bedside lamp. The next few hours are a blur in my memory. Police officers in our living room. Maria holding me tight while Mom paced back and forth, talking on the phone. Words like massive collision and died instantly floating around me like dark butterflies. Dad's truck had collided with a semi that had jackknifed it across the highway. They said he didn't suffer, as if that was supposed to make it better somehow. But nothing made it better. Nothing could bring back my father. The funeral is mostly a haze in my mind. I remember staring at the closed casket, not really believing Dad was inside. Mom put on quite a show, wailing and practically throwing herself across the casket at one point. Looking back now, I realize how theatrical it all was, but at 11, I thought that's just how adults handled grief. It was at the funeral that I met Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia for the first time. They looked so much like strangers, yet Uncle Robert had Dad's eyes, the same kind, crinkly corners when he tried to smile at me through his tears. "Helen," he said, kneeling down to my level. "I'm your father's brother. I'm so sorry we're meeting like this. Why haven't I met you before?" I remember asking, direct as only kids can be. A shadow crossed his face. "Your father and we had a disagreement many years ago. But none of that matters now. I had to come say goodbye to my little brother." After the funeral, Mom's grief evaporated like morning dew. Within weeks, she was meeting with Dad's lawyers, taking control of his company, and acting like she knew the first thing about running a transportation business. She started throwing around terms like restructuring and modernization, but it was obvious she was just making things up as she went along. I spent most of my time with Maria, who would shake her head sadly whenever Mom came home with shopping bags from expensive stores. "Your mother's spending money like water," Maria muttered one day while making my lunch. "Those poor drivers haven't been paid properly in weeks." She was right. Dad's employees started quitting one by one. These were men and women who'd worked for him for years, some since the beginning. I remembered their names, their faces, how they used to bring me little presents from their routes. Now they were leaving, unable to feed their families on promises and excuses. 6 months after Dad's death, Mom sold what was left of his company for a fraction of what it had been worth. She acted like she'd made some brilliant business decision, but everyone knew the truth: she'd run Dad's life's work into the ground. After the sale of Dad's company, Mom was rarely home, always out somewhere, and I spent most of my time with Maria. She'd started teaching me Spanish, saying it would come in handy someday. I spent a lot of time at the library after school. It was better than coming home to an empty house. Mom would breeze in late at night, sometimes smelling of wine, barely acknowledging my existence. "Oh, you're still up," she'd say, as if surprised to find me in my own home. Then she'd disappear into her room, and I wouldn't see her again until the next evening, if at all. Then came that Sunday night. I was doing homework in the kitchen when Mom burst through the door, giggling like a teenager. She wasn't alone. "Helen, sweetie," she called out, her voice thick with fake enthusiasm. "Come meet Richard." Richard was tall and wore an expensive suit that somehow still looked cheap. His smile didn't reach his eyes when he looked at me. "Helen," Mom said, clutching Richard's arm like a lifeline, "Richard and I got married last weekend. He's your new father. We're going to be a proper family again." "I already had a proper family," I said, my voice shaking. "I already have a father." Richard's fake smile disappeared. "Listen here, young lady," he said, his voice stern. "Your mother and I are married now. You need to accept that and show some respect." "You're not my father," I spat back. "You'll never be my father. See what I mean?" Richard turned to Mom. "Difficult child. Needs discipline." But Richard moving in was just the beginning. Within a week, his mother Gloria, his sister Janet, and his 12-year-old niece Madison had all moved in too. They took over the house like an invading army, rearranging furniture and changing the decor Mom and Dad had picked out together. Mom didn't seem to mind. She and Janet became instant best friends, spending hours shopping and gossiping. Gloria took over the kitchen, complaining about Maria's cooking until Mom fired her. I lost the only person who still cared about me in that house. Then came the final blow. I came home from school one day to find Madison in my room that Dad had built the bookshelf in, my room with the purple walls and fairy lights. "What are you doing?" I demanded. "Aunt Sarah said I could have this room," Madison smirked. "It's bigger than the guest room, and I need space for all my things." "Get out," I screamed. "This is my room." "Not anymore," she taunted, throwing my books off the shelves. "Your mom says you're moving to the small room down the hall." I lost it. I lunged at Madison, and we both went down in a tangle of arms and legs. I pulled her hair while she scratched at my face, both of us screaming. Richard and Mom ran in, pulling us apart. "Helen," Mom shrieked. "How dare you? Go to your new room right now." "No. This is my room. Dad gave it to me." Richard grabbed my arm roughly. "Your father is dead," he snarled. "This is my house now, and you'll do as you're told." They locked me in the small guest room for 2 days, only letting me out for school and bathroom breaks. My books and things were piled in boxes in the corner. Dad's bookshelf was thrown out with the trash. Through the wall, I could hear Madison playing music in my old room, and Mom laughing with Janet downstairs like nothing was wrong. A few weeks after the room incident, I was heading to the bathroom late at night when I heard voices from downstairs. I crept to the top of the stairs, staying in the shadows. "The girl is becoming more difficult every day," Richard was saying. "She's disrupting our family harmony. Have you considered finding her another home?" My heart stopped. "Another home? You mean adoption?" Mom asked, and my blood ran cold at how thoughtful she sounded. "I suppose that could work. She's still young enough." "It would be better for everyone," Janet added. "Madison's afraid of her after that attack, and honestly, she doesn't fit in here anymore." I ran back to my room, buried my face in my pillow, and told myself they couldn't mean it. Mom wouldn't give me away. She couldn't. I pushed the conversation to the back of my mind, convincing myself it was just talk. 2 months later, my 13th birthday arrived. I wasn't expecting much. My birthdays hadn't been celebrated since Dad died. But to my surprise, Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia showed up at the door. "Happy birthday, Helen," Uncle Robert said, hugging me tight. His eyes narrowed when Richard walked past, ignoring us completely. Mom had thrown together a hasty dinner, probably embarrassed that Dad's brother might judge her. The tension around the table was thick enough to cut with a knife. Then Mom cleared her throat. "Actually, Robert, Patricia, I'm glad you're here. There's something I need to discuss." Something in her tone made my stomach clench. "Helen isn't happy here," Mom continued, not looking at me. "And frankly, we're not happy either. She doesn't fit in with our new family dynamic. I've decided to put her up for adoption." The words hit me like a physical blow. The conversation I'd overheard hadn't been just talk after all. "I thought, since you and Patricia don't have children of your own," Mom continued, her voice casual as if she were discussing the weather, "you might want to take her. If not, I'll start looking for other families." The room spun. I couldn't breathe. On my birthday. She was giving me away on my birthday. Uncle Robert's chair scraped back so violently it fell over. "We'll take her," he thundered, his face red with fury. "And you, Sarah, are the most despicable excuse for a mother I've ever seen. How dare you?" Richard started to stand, but one look from Uncle Robert made him sink back into his chair. "Patricia," Uncle Robert said, his voice gentler, "help Helen pack her things. We're leaving now." Aunt Patricia wrapped an arm around my shaking shoulders and led me upstairs. We packed quickly, throwing my clothes and few remaining possessions into bags. I was crying so hard I could barely see. "It's going to be okay, sweetheart," Aunt Patricia kept whispering. "We've got you now." I walked out of that house without looking back at Mom. She didn't try to stop me, didn't try to say goodbye. The last thing I heard as Uncle Robert closed the car door was Madison asking if she could have my new room too. The transition wasn't easy at first. I'd wake up in my new room at Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia's house, momentarily confused about where I was. But then I'd smell Aunt Patricia's coffee and bacon wafting up from the kitchen, and remember that I was home, my real home. The adoption process moved quickly. Mom signed away her rights without hesitation, which hurt at the time but eventually felt like a blessing. Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia became Mom and Dad on paper, making official what was already true in my heart. "Helen," Uncle Robert said one morning over breakfast, "we enrolled you in Riverside Prep. It's a better school than your old one, and we think you'll like it there." I did like it there. Without the constant stress of my old home life, I started doing better in classes. My teachers noticed, and so did my new parents. They came to everything, every school play, every academic awards ceremony, every parent-teacher conference. When I joined the debate club, they sat through every competition, beaming with pride even when I lost. They encouraged me to try new things. Piano lessons, summer science camps, volunteering at the local animal shelter, they supported it all. Not just with money, but with genuine interest and involvement. The pain of my mother's rejection faded gradually, replaced by the warm certainty of being truly loved. I stopped thinking about her, stopped wondering if she ever thought about me. My new life was too full, too happy for those old hurts to matter anymore. High school graduation came, and I had the loudest cheering section in the audience, not just Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia, but their whole extended family who had embraced me as their own. "We have something to tell you," Aunt Patricia said at my graduation dinner. "We've been saving for your college fund since the day you came to live with us." They'd put aside enough to send me to any school I chose. I picked State University's business school, planning to major in investment management. College was incredible. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make them proud. During my junior year internship at Goldman Sachs, Aunt Patricia mentioned casually that she'd run into my birth mother at the grocery store. "She has a son now," Aunt Patricia said carefully, watching my reaction. "They're still in your father's old house with Richard's family." I just nodded, surprised to feel nothing but mild curiosity. That life seemed like a distant dream now, happening to someone else. After graduation, I landed a job at Morgan Stanley. My starting salary made my eyes pop. It was more money than I'd ever imagined making right out of college. The day I got my first paycheck, I went straight to the jewelry store. Uncle Robert had been wearing the same worn-out watch for years, and Aunt Patricia had been eyeing a particular pearl necklace in a local shop window. When I gave them their gifts, Aunt Patricia started crying, and Uncle Robert's hands shook as he put on his new watch. "You shouldn't have spent your money on us," he protested weakly. "Who else would I spend it on?" I asked, hugging them both. "You're my parents. You're the ones who made all of this possible." 6 years flew by after college. I climbed the corporate ladder at Morgan Stanley, earning promotion after promotion until I was managing my own team. Every success felt sweeter because I could share it with Mom and Dad, as I now called Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia without hesitation. The apartment came first, a beautiful 2-bedroom condo in a nice part of the city. Mom helped me decorate it, and Dad insisted on checking all the paperwork before I signed the mortgage. Then I met Michael. A year of dating, and he proposed during a weekend trip to the beach. I said yes, before he even finished asking the question. Mom cried when we told them, and Dad pulled Michael into a bear hug. "Welcome to the family, son," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. We threw ourselves into wedding planning. Mom and I spent weekends looking at venues and tasting cakes, while Dad and Michael bonded over budget spreadsheets and vendor contracts. Then the message arrived on Facebook. "Helen, sweetheart. I've heard about your upcoming wedding. I know it's been a long time, but I'm still your mother. I've changed, and I want to make things right. Please let me be part of your special day. I miss you so much." My hand shook as I read the message. I immediately called Mom. "I saw Sarah yesterday," Mom said quietly when I told her about the message. "At the grocery store. She didn't ask about you, not once. But when I mentioned how successful you've become, how you're getting married, well," her eyes lit up in a way I didn't like. Mom hesitated before continuing. "There's more. That niece of her husband's, Madison? She got pregnant, married some deadbeat, and moved back into the house with her husband. The whole family is constantly fighting." Sarah was complaining about money problems, rather loudly, in the middle of the store. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. So that's why she reached out. She needs money. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as memories flooded back, the room she gave away, the birthday she threw me away, the years of silence when she had every opportunity to reach out but didn't. Finally, I typed. "Sarah, let me be clear, you are not my mother. You lost that right when you gave me away on my 13th birthday. I have parents who love me unconditionally, something you never managed to do. I don't want you at my wedding. I don't want you in my life. Don't contact me again." I hit send, then immediately blocked her. My hands were steady now, my mind clear. I felt lighter somehow, as if I'd finally put down a weight I didn't know I was carrying. The morning of my wedding dawned perfect and clear. Michael's parents had rented the Mason Creek estate for the ceremony, a beautiful historic property with sprawling gardens and a restored Victorian mansion. I was in the bridal suite with Mom, putting the finishing touches on my makeup, when there was a knock at the door. "Ms. Anderson?" One of the security guards looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry to disturb you, but there's a situation at the front gate. There are some people insisting they know you, a man, woman, and teenage boy." My stomach dropped. Somehow, I knew exactly who it was. "I'll handle this," I said, standing up carefully in my wedding dress. "Helen, you don't have to," Mom started, but I shook my head. "Yes, I do. Once and for all." I walked to the front gates, my wedding heels clicking against the cobblestone path. And there they were, Sarah, Richard, and a boy who must have been my half-brother, though he looked exactly like Madison. "Helen!" Sarah screamed when she saw me, grabbing the iron bars of the gate. "How dare you not invite your own mother to your wedding? Let us in immediately." I took a moment to really look at her. She'd aged poorly, her designer clothes were obviously last season's, her makeup too heavy, her hair desperately in need of a touch-up. Richard looked thinner, more haggard, the expensive suit replaced by something off the rack. "Richard should be the one walking you down the aisle," Sarah continued, her voice shrill. "He's your father." That made me laugh, a genuine, hearty laugh that echoed across the courtyard. "My father? The man who locked me in a room for 2 days? The man who helped you throw away your own daughter? We're family," Sarah's voice cracked. "You can't just pretend we don't exist. Look at how you're living, this fancy wedding, your big job, your expensive clothes. Meanwhile, we can barely make ends meet. We're drowning in debt, and you're here playing princess." Ah, there it was. The real reason for this dramatic appearance. "I'm not playing at anything," I said coldly. "I worked for everything I have. And let's be clear, you're not my family. You gave up that right years ago. My parents are inside that house. They're the ones who raised me, supported me, loved me unconditionally. You need our help." Sarah was practically foaming at the mouth now. "After everything we did for you." "Everything you did for me?" I cut her off. "You mean throwing me away like garbage? Taking away my room, my home, my childhood? That's what you did for me." I turned to the security guards. "These people are strangers who are trespassing. Please remove them from the property. They are not welcome here." "You can't do this," Sarah screamed as the guards moved forward. "I'm your mother." "No," I said firmly. "You're just the woman who gave birth to me. There's a difference." I turned my back on her continued screams and walked away, my head held high. When I returned to the bridal suite, Mom was waiting with a worried expression. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" I took a deep breath and smiled. You know what? I've never been better. That chapter of my life is finally, completely closed. There was a knock at the door, and Dad poked his head in. "Ready, princess?" I looked in the mirror one last time, adjusting my veil. The woman looking back at me wasn't that scared 13-year-old girl anymore. I was strong, successful, and loved, truly loved. "I'm ready," I said, taking Dad's arm. The wedding march began to play as we approached the garden ceremony. I could see Michael waiting at the altar, beaming at me with tears in his eyes. Our guest stood, turning to watch as Dad walked me down the aisle. This was how it should be, the man who taught me to drive, who helped me with my college applications, who showed me what a father's love really means, was the one giving me away. The ceremony was perfect. Michael and I exchanged our vows under a blue sky, surrounded by flowers and the people who truly loved us. When he kissed me for the first time as my husband, our guests erupted in cheers. The reception lasted well into the night. Dad gave a touching speech that had everyone crying, then made everyone laugh with embarrassing stories from my college years. Mom danced with Michael while I danced with Dad, and I couldn't stop smiling. That was 6 months ago. Michael and I just got back from our honeymoon in Greece, and life has settled into a wonderful new normal. Sometimes people ask me about my real parents, and I tell them truthfully that my real parents are the ones who chose me, who loved me, who shaped me into the person I am today. I don't know what happened to Sarah and her family after the wedding, and honestly, I don't care. I heard through the grapevine that they had to sell Dad's old house, but that's not my concern anymore. That part of my life is over. My story isn't about being abandoned or betrayed. It's about finding your real family, the people who love you not because they have to, but because they want to. It's about choosing happiness over bitterness, forgiveness over anger, and moving forward instead of looking back. I'm Helen Anderson Mitchell now, and I couldn't be happier with the way things turned out. Every morning, I wake up next to a man who loves me completely, and every Sunday, we have dinner with the parents who chose me and never let me go.
Hi, I'm Emily Johnson, an 18-year-old high school senior from a small town in Ohio. But maybe I'm not as typical as I seem. I've always been a bookworm, and it's paid off. I'm at the top of my class, with my sights set on the Ivy League. But life isn't always smooth sailing, especially when you have an Aunt Karen in the mix. Aunt Karen, Uncle Bob, and their kids live just down the street. You'd think having family nearby would be great, right? Well, not when your aunt seems determined to undermine everything you do. The other day, I was helping my cousin Tyler with his math homework when Aunt Karen walked in. She looked at us and said, "Well, isn't this cute? Emily, sweetie, don't you have your own studying to do? Can't waste time on lost causes." I tried to stay calm. "Aunt Karen, Tyler's doing great. He just needs a little help with fractions," she scoffed. "Please, we all know Tyler isn't going to be the next Einstein, unlike some people who think they're God's gift to academics." I bit my tongue and turned back to Tyler, who looked like he wanted to disappear. Poor kid. Later that week, I was hanging out with my best friend Sophia and my boyfriend Mike at the bookstore where I work part-time. Sophia was flipping through a magazine when she suddenly squealed, "Emily, look at this scholarship opportunity. It's perfect for you." Mike leaned over her shoulder. "Well, that's a big deal. You should totally go for it, Em." I hesitated. "I don't know, guys. It's super competitive." Mike gave me a playful shove. "Come on, Emily, you're the smartest person I know. If anyone can get it, it's you." Sophia nodded enthusiastically. "He's right. Plus, imagine Karen's face when you tell her you got nominated for a prestigious scholarship." I couldn't help but laugh at that. All right, I'll apply." A few weeks later, I found out I was nominated for the scholarship. I was over the moon but braced myself for Aunt Karen's reaction. At the next family dinner, I decided to share the news. My parents were beaming with pride, and even Uncle Bob seemed genuinely happy for me. But Aunt Karen? She looked like she'd just bitten into a lemon. "Well, isn't that nice?" she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I suppose we'll be hearing about this nonstop for the next few months." My mom jumped in. "Karen, this is a big deal. We should be celebrating Emily's hard work." Aunt Karen plastered on a fake smile. "Oh, of course. Congratulations, Emily. Let's hope you can live up to expectations." I sighed internally. This was supposed to be a happy moment, but leave it to Aunt Karen to stir up drama. Then the day of the big family gathering came. Everyone was there to celebrate my scholarship nomination. But I could feel Aunt Karen's eyes boring into me from across the room. As I was chatting with my cousins, she suddenly stood up, her face twisted with what looked like triumph. "I have something to say," she announced loudly, silencing the room. My heart started racing. What was she up to now? I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I've discovered something shocking about our dear Emily. She pulled out a stack of papers. "I have proof that Emily has been cheating on her exams and assignments," she declared dramatically. "These are screenshots of her text messages discussing cheating methods." Chaos erupted. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "That's ridiculous," I shouted, my voice shaking. "I've never cheated in my life." My mom rushed to my side. "Karen, what are you talking about? This is absurd." Aunt Karen waved the papers. "It's all here in black and white." I always knew she was too good to be true. Uncle Bob tried to calm things down. "Let's all take a deep breath. Emily, what do you have to say about this?" I was trembling with anger and disbelief. "Those messages are fake. I don't know where Aunt Karen got them, but they're not mine. I would never cheat." My dad, looking troubled, spoke up. "Emily, we believe you, but we need to look into this. These are serious accusations." I couldn't believe it. "Dad, you can't seriously think I'd do this." The family gathering dissolved into heated arguments, and I felt like I was drowning. The next day at school was even worse. Word had already spread. As I walked down the hallway, I heard whispers. "Hey, did you hear about Emily? I always thought she was too smart to be real. No wonder she got that scholarship nomination." My favorite teacher, Mrs. Anderson, pulled me aside after class. "Emily, I've heard some concerning rumors. I hope they're not true." I fought back tears. "They're not, Mrs. Anderson. Someone's trying to frame me." She looked at me skeptically. "I hope so, Emily. The school will be investigating this, you know." Later that day, I received an email. My scholarship nomination was on hold pending an investigation. I felt like my world was crumbling around me. After school, I met up with Sophia and Mike at our favorite diner. As soon as I saw them, I broke down. Hey, Mike said, pulling me into a hug. "We've got your back, Em. We know you'd never cheat." Sophia nodded fiercely. "That witch is trying to ruin your life. We're not going to let her get away with it." I wiped my eyes, feeling a little less alone. But how could everyone believe her? Even my parents seemed unsure. Mike leaned in, his eyes full of determination. "We'll find a way to prove those screenshots are fake. There's got to be a way to trace them or something." "Yeah," Sophia chimed in. "We'll talk to anyone who'll listen. Your teachers, your classmates. We'll make them see the truth." For the first time that day, I felt a glimmer of hope. "Thanks, guys. I don't know what I'd do without you." As we talked, I overheard a conversation from the next booth. Mrs. Johnson, the town gossip, was talking. "Did you hear about Karen's niece? Caught cheating red-handed. Karen told me all about it, said she always knew that girl was trouble." I clenched my fists, fighting back a fresh wave of tears. Sophia squeezed my hand. "Don't listen to them, Em. We're going to fix this. Those idiots will be eating their words soon enough." I nodded, trying to believe her, but as I looked around the diner, at the sideways glances and heard the hushed conversations, I couldn't help but wonder, how was I going to get out of this mess? The next few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and anxiety-filled days, but I wasn't about to let Aunt Karen win. Sophia, Mike, and I decided to launch our own investigation. We started by closely examining the screenshots Karen had presented. Something about them just didn't look right. "Guys, look at this," Mike said, pointing at his laptop screen. "The font in these messages is slightly off. It's not the standard iPhone font." Sophia leaned in. "You're right, and the bubble color is a bit weird too." I felt a spark of hope. "So they're fake." Mike nodded confidently. "I bet my life on it." In fact, he started typing furiously. "Yep, here it is. There are websites that let you generate fake text conversations. I bet that's what Karen used." We high-fived, but our celebration was short-lived. We still needed undeniable proof. A few days later, I overheard my cousin Tyler on the phone while I was at their house, picking up some books I had lent him. "Mom, I can't do this anymore. I feel awful about what we did to Emily," he said, his voice shaky. I froze, my heart pounding. What was he talking about? I know you wanted me to get better grades, but framing Emily wasn't the answer. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Quietly, I recorded the last bit of the conversation on my phone before slipping out of the house. When I played the recording for Sophia and Mike, their jaws dropped. "That snake," Sophia exclaimed. "She set you up because Tyler was struggling in school." Mike looked thoughtful. "This is good, but we need more. We need to get Tyler to confess everything." We hatched a plan. Mike created a fake social media account, posing as a new kid in town who was also struggling with grades. Over the next week, he slowly gained Tyler's trust. Tyler eventually opened up, spilling everything in a series of messages. "My mom's been on my case about my grades. She even suggested I should cheat. When I told her I was thinking about it, she got this weird look in her eye. Next thing I know, she's showing me how to use a website to make fake text messages. She said we were going to teach Emily a lesson. I feel so guilty." I felt a mix of anger and pity for Tyler. He was just a kid caught in his mother's toxic web. But the real bombshell came when Mike managed to trace the IP address used to create the fake screenshots. "Em, you're not going to believe this," Mike said, excitement in his voice. "The IP address leads directly to your Aunt Karen's home computer." I couldn't help but let out a whoop of joy. "We've got her." Sophia was already planning our next move. We need to confront her at the next family gathering, make her confess in front of everyone. I nodded, feeling a mix of anticipation and nervousness. You're right. It's time to end this once and for all. As we prepared for the confrontation, a twinge of sadness hit me. How had things gotten so bad that my own aunt would go to such lengths to discredit me? But I pushed those thoughts aside. It was time to clear my name and show everyone the truth about Aunt Karen. Ready for this? Mike asked, squeezing my hand. I took a deep breath and nodded. More than ready. Let's do this. As we headed to my house for the family dinner, I felt an unexpected calm settle over me. No matter what happened next, the truth was finally going to come out. The family gathering was already in full swing when I decided it was time. I caught Mike's eye across the room, and he gave me a subtle nod. This was it. Everyone, I have something important to share, I announced, my voice steadier than I felt. The room fell silent. Aunt Karen looked smug. What is it, Emily? Finally ready to confess. I took another deep breath. Actually, Aunt Karen, I think you're the one who needs to confess. Her face paled as I pulled out my phone. I played Tyler's recorded conversation and then showed everyone the messages Mike had obtained. The room was dead silent. And that's not all, I continued. We traced the IP address used to create those fake screenshots. Care to guess where it came from, Aunt Karen? Uncle Bob turned to his wife, his face a mix of disbelief and fury. Karen, what have you done? Aunt Karen's facade crumbled. She burst into tears. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was just so frustrated with Tyler's grades, and Emily is always so perfect. My mom stood up, her voice shaking with anger. You framed my daughter out of jealousy, Karen. How could you? Uncle Bob's face was hard. I can't believe this, Karen. I want a divorce. The room erupted into chaos. Amid the shouting and crying, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was my dad. Emily, I'm so sorry we ever doubted you. Can you forgive us? I hugged him tight. Of course, Dad, you didn't know. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. My name was cleared at school, and my scholarship nomination was reinstated. The committee was even impressed by how I handled the false accusations. Aunt Karen became a pariah in our small town. She lost her job when the scandal broke, and most of the family stopped speaking to her. I felt bad for my cousins, especially Tyler. They were victims in this too. One day, Tyler approached me after school. Emily, I'm so sorry about everything. I should have spoken up sooner. I gave him a small smile. It's okay, Tyler. I know it wasn't easy for you either. How about I help you with your studies, for real this time? His face lit up. Really? You do that after everything? I nodded. We're family, and it's not your fault your mom did what she did. As the dust settled, I found myself packing for college. I got my scholarship, and I was ready for a fresh start. Looking around my room, I thought about everything that had happened. You okay? Sophie asked, helping me pack. I smiled. Yeah, I am. You know, as crazy as it sounds, I'm almost grateful for what happened. It taught me a lot about standing up for myself and the importance of integrity. Mike chimed in from where he was taping up boxes. Plus, you totally kicked butt handling it all. You're going to crush it in college, Em. I laughed. Thanks, guys. I couldn't have done it without you. As I zipped up my last suitcase, I thought about Aunt Karen. Last I heard, she was living in a small apartment, trying to rebuild her life. Part of me felt sorry for her. But I knew I couldn't let her toxicity affect me anymore. Now that my story's over, I have a question for you. If you were in Emily's shoes, would you have forgiven Tyler and offered to tutor him, or would you have cut ties with all of Karen's children? Is it fair to help those connected to someone who tried to destroy your future? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective matters, and we'd love to hear from you. Hey, I'm Emma Thompson, just your average 12-year-old girl from a small town in Ohio. Or at least that's what people think. My life's not exactly typical. My parents, Robert and Linda, are successful business owners who seem to care more about their lavish parties than about me. But hey, that's just how things are. It's a regular Monday morning, and I'm getting ready for school. I sling my backpack over my shoulder and head downstairs, hoping to catch my parents before they rush off to work. Mom? Dad, you guys here? Silence, of course. I glance into the kitchen and spot a note stuck to the fridge. Emma, dinner's in the microwave. We'll be home late. Mom and Dad. I sigh, grab a granola bar, and head out. Just another day in the Thompson household. As I walk to school, my best friend Zoe catches up to me. Wait up. Hey Zoe, I grin, relieved to see a friendly face. So, are you excited for your birthday party this weekend? The thought instantly lifts my mood. Oh my gosh, yes. I can't believe I'm finally turning 13. It's going to be epic. We chat about the party, Zoe being the only person who really gets me. She knows what my home life is like. At school, I'm putting my books away when I hear Tyler Wilson and his friends snickering nearby. Look, it's little orphan Emma, Tyler taunts. Bet your parents forgot your birthday again this year. I slam my locker shut, glaring at him. Shut up, Tyler. At least my parents didn't have to buy my friends. His face flushes red and he storms off. A pang of guilt hits me, but he started it. Later in Miss Rodriguez's English class, we're discussing To Kill a Mockingbird. I raise my hand to answer a question, and Miss Rodriguez beams at me. Excellent analysis, Emma. You have a real gift for literature. Her praise warms me in a way that's rare at home. As class ends, Miss Rodriguez asks me to stay behind. Emma, how are things at home? She asks gently. I shrug, avoiding her eyes. Same as always, I guess. She looks concerned but doesn't push it. I'm here if you ever need to talk. On my way home, I see Mr. Johnson, our elderly neighbor, struggling with groceries. I jog over to help him. Thank you, Emma, he says warmly. You're such a thoughtful young lady. As we chat, I hear my parents' voices drifting from their home office. They sound tense. We need to deal with this problem once and for all, my mom says. I know, Robert, but what about her birthday party? My dad replies. Perfect cover, we'll use that. Their voices fade as they move away from the window. My stomach tightens. What were they talking about? Probably just more business stuff, I tell myself. That night, I lie in bed, staring at the ceiling. Despite everything, I can't help but feel excited about my birthday. Maybe this year will be different. Maybe they'll actually pay attention to me for once. Little did I know, my 13th birthday would change everything, but not in the way I had hoped. The big day finally arrived. I woke up with a mix of excitement and nervousness. I bounced downstairs, hoping for at least a happy birthday from my parents. Instead, I found them whispering in the kitchen. Mom? Dad? They jumped like they'd been caught doing something wrong. My mom quickly plastered on a fake smile. Oh, Emma, happy birthday, sweetie. We've got a lot to do before the party. Why don't you go get ready? I nodded, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling in my gut. Something wasn't right. As the afternoon rolled around, guests began to arrive. Aunt Sarah and Uncle Tom showed up, followed by the Wilsons. Yes, even Tyler and my grandparents. Zoe burst in with a big smile, carrying a giant wrapped present. Happy birthday, Em. This is going to be awesome. I tried to match her enthusiasm, but my parents were acting weird. They kept pulling adults aside, whispering in hushed tones. Every time I got close, they'd stop talking. After cake and presents, my dad clinked his glass. Everyone, if I could have your attention, please. The room fell silent. My mom stood next to him, her face unreadable. As you know, Linda and I have always strived for success in both our business and personal lives. But sometimes sacrifices must be made for the greater good. My heart pounded in my chest. What was he talking about? That's why we've made the difficult decision to donate Emma to the Brighter Futures Youth Charity. The room exploded with gasps and confused whispers. I felt like the ground had dropped out from beneath me. Donate me? Like I was some piece of furniture they didn't want anymore. My mom chimed in, her voice calm and practiced. Emma has been challenging. We believe this is the best solution for everyone involved. I couldn't breathe. The room spun around me. Zoe grabbed my hand, her face as pale as mine. Aunt Sarah stood up, her voice trembling with rage. Have you two lost your minds? She's your daughter, not some tax write-off. Now, Sarah? Dad started, but she cut him off. No, Robert, this is insane. You can't just give away your child. I looked around the room. Some people were horrified, others confused. Tyler's mom was crying, and my parents, they just looked annoyed, like everything wasn't going according to plan. Emma. Zoe's voice sounded distant. Emma, breathe. It's going to be okay. But it wasn't okay. Nothing would ever be okay again. I stood up, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes on me. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. What could I even say? Instead, I ran out of the dining room past the shocked faces of my family and friends. I bolted through the front door and kept running, ignoring the shouts behind me. I didn't stop until my lungs burned and my legs turned to jelly. I ended up at the old playground a few blocks away, collapsing onto a swing. That's when the tears finally came. How could they do this? And on my birthday of all days? I had always known I wasn't the daughter they wanted, but this was beyond cruel. I heard footsteps approaching and tense, ready to bolt again. But it was only Zoe, out of breath and worried. "Emma," she began. "Don't," I cut her off. "Just don't say anything." She nodded and sat on the swing beside me. We stayed like that, in silence as the sun began to set, my world completely shattered. After what felt like hours, I realized I couldn't go home. Not now. Maybe not ever. I wandered aimlessly until I found myself standing in front of Mr. Johnson's house. With shaking hands, I knocked on his door. "Emma." "Good heavens, child, what's wrong?" I broke down, telling him the whole awful story. Mr. Johnson ushered me inside, his face a mix of shock and concern. "You can stay here tonight, Emma. We'll figure this out." The next morning, Zoe showed up with Miss Rodriguez. They had been up all night brainstorming. "We've got a plan," Zoe said, her eyes filled with determination. "Miss Rodriguez is looking into your legal options." Miss Rodriguez nodded. "What your parents are trying to do is wrong, Emma. We're going to fight this." Just then, there was another knock at the door. To my surprise, it was Mrs. Wilson, Tyler's mom. "Emma, sweetie, we heard what happened. It's despicable. We want to offer you a place to stay until this gets sorted out." I was stunned. The Wilsons? But Tyler hated me. As if reading my mind, Mrs. Wilson added, "Tyler's on board. He feels awful about how he's treated you." With few options, I accepted. Moving into the Wilsons' house felt strange. Tyler avoided me at first, throwing dirty looks whenever we crossed paths. One day, I overheard him talking to his mom. "Why does she have to be here? It's not our problem." "Tyler James Wilson. That girl has been through hell. You will treat her with kindness, or so help me." I retreated to my room, feeling more alone than ever. A few days later, I snuck back to my old house to grab some clothes. In my parents' office, I found a folder labeled Emma Removal Plan. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were documents dating back years, emails to boarding schools, consultations with lawyers about emancipation, even inquiries to foreign orphanages. They'd been planning this for a long time. I was so engrossed that I didn't hear Tyler come in. "What are you doing here?" I jumped, dropping the folder. Papers scattered everywhere. "I stammered. To my surprise, Tyler knelt down and started helping me gather the documents. His eyes widened as he saw what they were. "Holy crap, Emma. Is this for real?" I nodded, tears welling up again. For the first time, I saw genuine sympathy in Tyler's eyes. "This is messed up, like seriously messed up. I'm sorry, Emma, for everything." It was a turning point. That night, Tyler called a meeting with Zoe, Miss Rodriguez, and his parents. "We need to do something," he said firmly. "Emma's parents are monsters. We have proof now." And just like that, I had a team, people who cared, who were willing to fight for me. We spent hours gathering evidence and building a case against my parents. "We're going to expose them," Zoe declared. "Not just for what they did to you, Emma, but for everything." Looking around at these people, my allies, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Hope. "Okay," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Let's do this. Let's take them down." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. We worked tirelessly, gathering every scrap of evidence we could find. Zoe and I sifted through years of photos and documents, while Tyler used his computer skills to dig into my parents' business records. Miss Rodriguez surprised us by bringing in an unexpected ally, Mr. Johnson. It turns out our kindly old neighbor was a retired lawyer, specializing in family law. "I've been watching your parents for years, Emma," he said, his voice stern. "What they've done is unconscionable. We're going to make this right." As we dug deeper, we uncovered something shocking. My parents' business, the very thing that made them wealthy and respected, was built on fraud. "They've been cooking the books for years," Tyler explained, showing us the financial records he'd hacked. Tax evasion, embezzlement, you name it. We decided to strike on two fronts. First, we'd anonymously tipped off Child Protective Services about the neglect and abandonment. Then, we sent another anonymous tip to the IRS about the fraud. The day after we sent the tips, all hell broke loose. My parents showed up at the Wilsons' house, all teary-eyed and apologetic. "Emma, sweetie, we've made a terrible mistake," Mom pleaded. "Please come home, we love you." I almost laughed. "Love me? You tried to throw me away like garbage." We were confused, stressed about the business, Dad chimed in. "We realize now how wrong we were." That's when I dropped the bomb. "You mean the business you've been running illegally? The one built on fraud?" Their faces went pale. I continued, my voice cold. "I know everything, the years of neglect, the plans to get rid of me, the illegal business practices. It's over." As if on cue, we'd heard sirens approaching. Mom started to cry, real tears this time. Dad looked like he might be sick. "Emma, please," he begged. "We can fix this. We're family." I shook my head. "No, we're not. Not anymore." I watched as they were led away in handcuffs, a mix of emotions swirling inside me, relief, sadness, but mostly, freedom. 2 years later, I'm 15 now, and life is good. Really good. The Wilsons officially adopted me last year, and it turns out having parents who actually care is pretty awesome. My biological parents, they're facing multiple fraud charges. Last I heard, they're looking at serious prison time. Once the truth came out, the community turned their backs on them. As for me, I'm thriving. I'm on the honor roll, joined the debate team, Miss Rodriguez is the coach, and even started a support group for kids from difficult home situations. Zoe's still my best friend, and Tyler, well, he's like the annoying but lovable brother I never had. The other day, I was at the mall with Zoe when I saw them, Robert and Linda. They were out on bail, looking haggard and beaten down. They spotted me and started to approach, but I just turned and walked away. Zoe squeezed my hand in support. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded, realizing I truly was. "Yeah, I am. They don't have any power over me anymore." As we left the mall, I thought about everything I'd been through, the pain, the betrayal, but also the kindness and love I'd found along the way. I may have lost the family I was born into, but I gained something far more precious. A family that chose me, that fought for me, that loves me for who I am. And that, more than any revenge or justice, is the sweetest victory of all. Emma's journey from betrayal to triumph has come to an end. Now I have a question for you. If you were in Emma's shoes, would you ever forgive your parents for trying to abandon you? Or do you believe some actions are truly unforgivable? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Hey everyone, I'm Jake, just your typical 18-year-old trying to figure life out. I've always worked hard, straight A's, juggling a part-time job, the whole deal. My grandparents, total MVPs. They've been my biggest supporters, always believing in me when I doubted myself. "Jake, my boy," Grandpa would say, "you've got a fire in you. Don't let anyone snuff it out." But then there's my family, my parents and my younger brother, Matt. Oh man, where do I even begin? Matt's 16, and in my parents' eyes, he's basically Einstein 2.0. Matt got another perfect score on his math test. Did you see Matt's science project? He's gonna cure cancer one day. Meanwhile, I'm like, hey, I got into the honor society. And crickets, complete silence. But everything changed over one dinner. My grandparents slid an envelope across the table. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it, sweetie," my grandma said, practically bouncing in her seat. I opened it and my heart nearly stopped. A full scholarship to Oxford, no way. I looked at Grandpa and he was grinning. "You earned it, Jake. We've been saving for years and we know this is your dream." I was on cloud 9. Oxford. I couldn't stop dreaming about the future, international relations, maybe even becoming a diplomat. But when I glanced at my parents, something felt off. They were too quiet. Dad kept clearing his throat, and Mom wouldn't even meet my eyes. "That's great, son," Dad said, but it sounded like the words were stuck in his throat. Later that night, while grabbing a snack, I overheard them talking. "We can't let him go," Mom said. "What about Matt?" Dad replied. "I know, but it's Oxford for crying out loud. How can we say no? But Matt's the gifted one. He deserves a chance like this." "Jake, he's always been so average." Average? My own parents thought I was average. Maybe we could ask the grandparents to transfer the scholarship to Matt, Dad suggested. He'd have a better shot at getting in anyway. I was floored. Everything I'd worked for, they were ready to hand it over to Matt without a second thought. My dream, my hard work, meant nothing to them. I went back to my room, my mind spinning. Should I fight for what was mine, or let them hand my future over to Matt? One thing was certain, I wasn't backing down without a fight. 2 weeks before I was supposed to leave for Oxford, my parents called a family meeting. I should have known something was up. They looked shifty, avoiding eye contact. "Jake, honey," Mom started, her voice sickly sweet. "We need to talk about the scholarship." Dad jumped in. "Matt's grades are exceptional, and we think he'd benefit more from Oxford." I felt like I'd been sucker punched. "What? You can't be serious." "Now, Jake," Mom said, "be reasonable. Matt's gifted. This opportunity could really launch his career." "He's 16. I shot back. "I'm the one who's worked for this." Dad tried to look sympathetic. "We know, but Matt's potential." "Potential?" I exploded. "What about my potential? This is my scholarship." That's when Matt sauntered in, grinning like he'd already won. "Thanks, Mom and Dad. I'll make you proud at Oxford." I lost it. "Are you kidding me, Matt? This is mine." "Sorry, bro," he shrugged, still smirking. "Guess they finally figured out who's got the brains." I stormed out, slamming the door so hard the house shook. I needed my grandparents to step in, but when I called, all I got was their voicemail. "Hey, it's Grandpa. We're on a dream cruise for a month. No reception out here in the middle of the ocean. Catch up when we're back." Great, just great. I felt my whole world crumble. Everything I dreamed of gone, just like that. I fell into a funk, barely eating or sleeping. My best friend, Sophia, noticed something was wrong and came over. "All right, spill it," she demanded. So I told her everything: the scholarship, my parents' betrayal, Matt's smugness. By the time I finished, I was a mess. Sophia stood up, hands on her hips. "Oh hell no, we are not letting them get away with this." I sighed. What can I do? They've made up their minds. Sophia's eyes narrowed. "Fight back. This is your future. You can't just let them take it." "But how?" I asked, feeling completely hopeless. Sophia grinned, a mischievous glint in her eye. "We expose them. Gather evidence. Show everyone what they're really like." I sat up straighter, her energy infectious. "You really think we can do that?" "I know we can," she said confidently. "Your parents and Matt have been pulling this crap for years. There's got to be a paper trail." For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. "You're right. There's no way Matt's as perfect as they say." Sophia nodded. "Exactly. We'll dig into his academic history, talk to your teachers, and when your grandparents get back, we'll have a rock-solid case." I stood up, feeling determination surge through me. "Let's do it. I'm not giving up my future without a fight." Sophia grinned. "That's the Jake I know. We'll show them what happens when they mess with the wrong guy." We dove right in, turning into detectives, piecing together years of lies and deceit. I started by pulling out old report cards, awards, and school records. It didn't take long before something caught my attention. "Look at this," I said to Sophia, pointing at Matt's transcript. "Straight A's in advanced classes, but his standardized test scores are average at best." Sophia frowned. "That's weird. Let's dig deeper." I reached out to Oxford, explaining the situation. They were stunned and quickly sent over documents confirming my acceptance and scholarship. Step 1. Complete. As we kept investigating, a disturbing pattern emerged. Matt's genius status was built on a shaky foundation. We found suspicious similarities between his essays and online sources, discrepancies in his grades, and even altered report cards. "Jake, look at this." Sophia gasped, showing me a comparison between Matt's science fair project and an obscure research paper. It's practically identical. A cold realization hit me. He's been cheating for years. We needed more concrete proof. That's when I remembered Mr. Thompson, my old teacher who never bought into Matt's act. I reached out to him, and he agreed to meet us. "I've been waiting for someone to finally catch on," Mr. Thompson said, handing over a thick folder. "I've documented every instance of Matt's cheating and your parents' cover-ups." Just then, my phone rang. It was my grandparents. They were back. I filled them in, and they were horrified. "We're coming over right now," Grandpa said, his voice shaking with anger. When they arrived, we all gathered in the living room. It felt like a courtroom, the tension thick in the air. "What's this about?" Dad demanded, but he already knew. I laid out everything, the fake grades, the plagiarism, the lies. Matt's face went pale. "Is this true?" Grandma asked, her voice trembling. Matt broke. I didn't mean for it to go this far," he sobbed. "I just wanted to make you proud. Jake was always so smart and hardworking." I felt inadequate. Mom tried to defend him. "We were just trying to help Matt. We thought." "You thought wrong," Grandpa thundered. "You betrayed Jake, and you enabled Matt's dishonesty. This stops now." Matt turned to me, tears streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry, Jake. I never wanted to hurt you. I couldn't handle the pressure." I stood there, feeling a mix of anger and pity. "Matt, cheating and lying isn't the answer. You're smart in your own way. You didn't need to do this." My parents looked stunned, guilt written all over their faces. Dad tried to apologize. "Son, we never meant for this to happen. We thought we were doing what was best." "For who?" I cut him off. "Certainly not for me, and not even for Matt. You failed both of us." Mom reached out, her voice breaking. "Jake, please, we're so sorry. Can't we just talk about this?" I shook my head. "Sorry doesn't cut it. You were willing to destroy my future for a lie. I can't forgive that. Not now. Maybe not ever." The room fell into a heavy silence. Sophia squeezed my hand, her quiet support the only thing keeping me grounded. Grandpa stood up, his voice firm. "Jake will be going to Oxford as planned. As for the rest of you, I suggest you take a long, hard look at the damage you've caused." As we left the house, I felt an immense weight lift off my shoulders. The truth was out, and my future was back on track. But the cost, the shattered trust and broken family, was something I have to deal with in time. Sophia hugged me tightly. "You did it. Jake, you fought for yourself." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of triumph and sadness. "Yeah, I did. Now it's time to move forward." The aftermath of the confrontation was intense. My grandparents wasted no time taking legal action to reinstate my scholarship. They were like bulldogs, refusing to back down until Oxford agreed to honor their original offer. Meanwhile, Oxford launched a full-scale investigation into Matt's fraudulent application. It was a mess, but I couldn't bring myself to feel bad for him. He'd made his bed. Word spread fast in our small town. Suddenly, my parents weren't the golden couple anymore. Dad's law firm put him on leave, pending an ethics review, and Mom resigned from the PTA in disgrace. Matt had it even worse. Once the truth came out, he was expelled and told he'd have to repeat his junior year. I heard he barely left his room for weeks. As for me, I was busy preparing for my delayed start at Oxford. My grandparents insisted I move in with them, which was honestly a relief. Living with my parents and Matt had become suffocating. "Focus on your studies," Grandpa said. "We'll handle everything else." Sophia was my rock through it all. She helped me pack, quizzed me on British slang, and promised to visit during breaks. "You're going to crush it at Oxford," she said, her eyes shining with pride. The day I left for Oxford was bittersweet. My parents tried to come to the airport, but I asked them not to. Matt sent a text, "Good luck. I'm sorry for everything." I didn't reply. Fast forward a year, and life looked completely different. Oxford was everything I dreamed of and more. I was acing my classes, had a tight group of friends, and even joined the debate team. One sunny afternoon, I was video chatting with Sophia when she dropped a bombshell. "Your mom called me," she said hesitantly. "Your parents are getting divorced." I felt nothing. "Can't say I'm surprised," I replied. "Anything else?" Sophia nodded. "Matt's struggling. He can't get into any decent colleges with his record. He's talking about community college." Part of me felt a twinge of sympathy, but I quickly squashed it. "He made his choices," I said firmly. Sophia smiled softly. "You've really grown, Jake. I'm proud of you." I grinned back. "Speaking of growth, when are you coming to visit? I want to show my girlfriend all the sights." Her eyes widened. "Girlfriend?" "Well, yeah," I said, suddenly nervous. "If you want to be, that is." Her smile lit up the screen. "Of course I do, you dork. We spent the next hour planning her visit and talking about the future. As we chatted, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened. I said, a year ago, I thought my life was over. But now? Sophia asked, smiling. Now I'm thriving, I finished, nodding. I've learned a lot about standing up for myself, about toxic family dynamics, and about who I really am when everything's stripped away. And who are you, Jake? Sophia asked softly. I thought for a moment. I'm someone who won't let others define my worth. Someone who fights for what's right, even when it's hard. And someone who values real relationships over fake perfection. Sophia's eyes misted. That's the Jake I fell in love with. As we said our goodbyes, promising to video chat again soon, a deep sense of peace washed over me. The road had been rough, but I had come out stronger on the other side. My future was bright, and for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see where it would lead. The story ends here, but now I've got a question for you. If you were in my shoes, would you ever forgive your parents and brother for what they did? Or is some betrayal too deep to come back from? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'm really curious to hear what you do in this situation. And if you enjoyed this wild ride, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel.